Good morning. Today is lesson 8-12, where we are identifying pieces of our quadratic. We are not done with this unit yet. We still have quite a few more days. We're going to be learning about the quadratic formula for the next, not this week, but next week. But before we even get into the quadratic formula, we need to be able to identify pieces of our quadratic. So what we're doing today is basically breaking apart the parabolas that we've been studying over the past few weeks. Remember, we started learning this, I want to say maybe last week or a week and a half ago. So, a few reminders for the rest of the week though. Today is Tuesday. Tomorrow and Thursday, you'll be working on a Delta Math assignment, and Friday is going to be a makeup day for the end of the marking period, because our marking period is ending Friday, and then we're going to be going into marking period 3 next week. All right. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email myself or Miss Townsend. And make sure that you write down your daily noticing a question for this lesson. Just giving you a heads up, this lesson we are just identifying our A, B, and our C values. So before we even dive into it, remember quadratics are always written in this form. ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And it always has to be equal to 0. The reason why it has to be equal to 0 is because in math, if we have equals 0, that's another way of saying y equals, which basically means we can type it into our graphing calculator, or we can type it into Desmos, or any of that stuff. Okay? The first thing you want to do is make sure that everything is on one side of the equal sign, because if it's not on that one side of the equal sign, you can't identify your A, your B, and your C. Okay, now for bullet 2, you need to make sure it's in order. If it's not in order, you want people to identify your A, your B, and your C value. It always goes x squared first, x next, number last. So what that means is we basically just want our parabola to be, or our quadratic to be in standard form. Standard form, which we learned about, I want to say, when we did our factoring unit, which was quite a few units ago. And we said our standard form was sort of like a movie where the leading star was up front because they were the most important. Well, guess what? When we have parabolas and quadratics, x squared is the most important. So let's go a little deeper. And again, like I said before, it's very, very important for what we go over next week, which is the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula is basically a different method of solving quadratics. We already learned how to factor a few months ago. We learned completing the square last week, and today what we're going to be looking at is just identifying those A, B, and C values. So all we're doing today is just identifying. So in our first example, we have x squared plus 5x plus 6 equals 0. The first thing we want to say, is it equal to 0? Boom, boom, it's equal to 0. One thing you'll realize is that there's no number attached to your x squared. So what we do whenever we don't have a number attached is we put like a 1 there as a placeholder. So it's sort of like the alphabet. A comes first, B comes next, and C comes last. So I'm going to do some little color coding. So A I'll do in red, B I'll do in blue, and C I'll do in green. So the number attached to my x squared is a positive 1. The number attached to my x is a 5. And the number that's hanging out by itself is my positive 6. So those are my A, B, and C values. Note, they are all positive for this quadratic. There's nothing that really means, but we will be looking at that a little more next week. So make sure, though, that you are keeping track of the sign. If you want, you can try to do this next question by yourself, or pause, just breathe, just relax. Now we have x squared plus 7x plus 12 equals 0. It's equal to 0, boom, boom, we're going to keep on going. I don't see anything next to my x squared, so I'm going to put a 1 there just for old time's sakes like we did before. So I have A, B, and C. So my A value is always the one that's first. It's always the number attached to my x squared term. And in this case, it's the 1 again. So my 1 is making an appearance. Ooh, didn't mean to put it in green. So in this case, A is positive 1. What do you think B is? 7. And C, positive 12. One thing you will need to, I hope you noticed, is that I'm not putting my x squared with my 1. I'm not putting my x with my 7. I'm not putting just, well, yeah, I'm putting just a 12. But we need to make sure that we're not putting our variables with it. We're just talking about the coefficients attached to our variables, because that's going to play a major role when we go into next week. All right, now we're going to go into the next level of problems. So we're going to amp up the rigor a little of it. So in this example, I have x squared plus x equals 4. But here's the issue. I don't see an equal 0, and I want everything on the left-hand side. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this x by taking away an x. So my x's cancel. So I get x squared minus x equals 4. Now the reason why I'm not saying x squared minus x is x is because x squared and x aren't like terms. Remember, to be like terms, they have to have the same variable and the same exponent. So I look at my example and I'm still not equal to 0. So I have to look at this 4 and figure out how to get it to the left-hand side. Well, the only way to do that is to make a positive 4 a negative 4. So my 4's cancel. So I get x squared minus x minus 4 equals 0. Now I'm going to go through my equation and double check. Is it equal to 0? It's equal to 0, so I'm already in the clear. But one thing that I always recommend you do with these questions is always put your imaginary 1s in front of your x's in case there's nothing there. Now that I have numbers in front of every variable and I have a number hanging out by itself, I'm now going to do my a value, my b value, and my c value. So my a value is the number attached to my x squared. In this case, it's a 1 again. The b value is the one attached to my x. In this case, it's not a 1, it's a negative 1. And then the c is the number hanging out by itself. It's a negative 4. So in this example, I went from going to x squared equals x plus 4 to having an a value of 1, a b value of negative 1, and a c value of negative 4. Now, one thing I would like you to do is pause this video and try this next example with this 5x squared, this 50x, and this equal to negative 125 by yourself. So at this time, you should pause. And now I'm going to work through it. So I look at this equation. I have 5x squared plus 50x equals negative 125. I ask myself, is it equal to 0? I look at it, it's not equal to 0. So I have to get it equal to 0. So I look at my negative 125 and I say to myself, the only way to get rid of that negative is to add. So to get rid of that negative 125, I add 125 to both sides. Add 125. And there's nothing for me to combine that 125 with on the left-hand side of my equal sign. So all I'm left with is 5x squared, plus 50x plus 125 equal to 0. I now need to find my a value, my b value, and my c value. And the a value is the number attached to my x squared. In this case, it's a positive 5. In this example, my b value is a 50. And now my c value is the number hanging out by itself. It's a positive 125. And that is what we need to figure out for today. All we need to do is just identify our a value, b value, and c value. So your next task is to make sure you write down one noticing or one question. If you want to, you could even create your own example of a quadratic and then identify your a, b, and c value for myself and Miss Townsend. The next thing you need to do is work on your independent practice and prepare for tomorrow's Delta Math assignment. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email myself or Miss Townsend. And remember to make sure that you fill out your daily attendance form for the school. Have a great day, ladies.